Big night tonight with President Biden's State of the Union address. There will be several speeches offered. It'll be President Biden speaking, as I like to say, 9 p.m. Philly time this evening. The Republican response, and we're accustomed to there being an opposing party's response, that'll be delivered by Governor Kim Reynolds from the great state of Iowa. That will be the Republican address. Here's something that's unusual. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib will deliver a response to a president from her own party. I'm looking at Axios coverage, and it says centrist House Democrats are unloading on Representative Rashida Tlaib, the Democrat from Michigan, for her plan to give a response to President Biden's State of the Union address. Quote, "It's like keying your own car and slashing your own tires," said Representative Josh Gottheimer, the Democrat from New Jersey, which brings me to Congressman Gottheimer as well as Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick, because together they will offer a quote unquote perspective on behalf of No Labels problem solvers after the president's address, and both of them join me now. Let me begin with you, Congressman Gottheimer. Talk to me about Rashida Tlaib and the inappropriateness, in your opinion, of what she's going to do.
Well, my concern is I think that after a president delivers a State of the Union address, what we should all do is obviously support the president, and this is their moment to come before Congress, Democrat or Republican, to give us an update on the State of the Union, on where we are as a country. And right now, as you know, Michael, with what's going on in the Ukraine and the devastation there, I'm hoping that we come together as a country. And Brian and I, when we offer a perspective this evening, and we're going to speak at No Labels, but as the Problem Solvers Caucus, we're going to go join them to just give our perspective on what we hear. The ideas about unity and coming together as a country, I just don't think it's very constructive to have members of our own party coming out there and swinging at the president, preemptively critiquing the president. I just don't think that that's very helpful. We need to focus on where we can get things done together. And as Brian and I have been committed to as co-chairs of the Problem Solvers Caucus.
Congressman Fitzpatrick, is this a response, or do you already know what you'll be saying tonight?
I don't know what I'm going to be saying, because I think the way it should work is you listen to the delivery and the content, and you respond accordingly, and you respond with integrity. You don't, resuscitate partisan talking points. Nobody wants that, and nobody knows that better than you, Michael. You come from our neck of the woods, and our perspective of being pragmatic and being moderate and giving people what they want and what they expect, which is an honest critique. This is what you agree with. This is what you disagree with. And this should be the path forward for our country. That's what most people want. And that's why we decided to do this. Obviously, Josh and I are the co-chairs of the bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus. No Labels is an outside organization that brings like-minded people together that are tired of the Hatfield versus McCoy brand of politics. It's hurting our country.
So, Congressman Gottheimer, will you two get your thoughts together and offer a bipartisan perspective, or how will this unfold?
Listen, there's plenty of things that Brian and I agree on and the problem solvers agree on. And as we like to say, we don't get together to get to know, we get together to get to yes and figure out where we can come together. Things like making sure that we have safe communities and standing by law enforcement, funding, not defunding law enforcement, or focused on making sure that we have address cost issues and affordability. And Brian and I and others have been working on supply chain issues, also important. And I think coming out of COVID, and tonight I think will be very symbolic that way. You'll see most of us not wearing masks. And I think that's a clear transition that hopefully we're getting back to normal and helping our small businesses and our families, keeping kids in school. We'll talk about things like infrastructure that Brian and I worked so hard, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which is working with our Senate colleagues, Democrats and Republicans. And now we're seeing that move forward. So there's plenty that we agree on. And I really believe we should be focused on the areas where we agree. I'm sure we'll have differences, but really we try to focus on where we can agree.
Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but in your days as an FBI agent, I think you traveled to Ukraine, played a role relative to investigating corruption there, and I know you play a leadership role pertaining to the Ukraine situation in the Congress. So relative to that issue, what do you think you're going to want to say tonight?
And we have to stand behind Ukraine, Michael, and all freedom-loving countries across the planet. This is a very defining moment, not just for the West, but for the world. Ukraine is a young democracy. They're 30 years old. We're a young democracy. We're 245 years old. We used to be a younger democracy like Ukraine. And all young democracies that are thriving to become part of the West and join NATO and join the EU like Ukraine is, we have to stick by them. And we haven't done enough, Michael. We just haven't. And I know that everybody's heartbroken based on what they see unfolding in Ukraine, and it's going to get worse, unfortunately. It's going to get a lot worse in the coming days. And we are better than this, Michael, to just stand by. And granted, we have done a lot on the sanctions front, but we haven't done enough. Yes, we've given them certain weapons to defend themselves, but we haven't done enough, and it hasn't been timely enough. And there's other things we can be doing, with respect to with our NATO allies to help Ukraine. We can't just sit back and watch. I drew the equivalent I put a social media post out the other day. I drew the equivalent of, the big schoolyard bully beating up this, smaller defenseless kid in the schoolyard, and everybody's standing around in a circle just watching and not intervening. Now, granted, we are intervening with sanctions, but there's massive holes in it. 50% of Russia's economy is oil and gas, and they've been left untouched by sanctions. They're getting some military equipment, but not all that they're requesting. We got to do better with this, Michael, because the scenes we're going to see on television in the next coming days are not going to be pretty.
Congressman Gottheimer, it's frustrating to watch that convoy, a 40-mile-long convoy, approach Kyiv, and yet there seems like there's nothing that can be done unless the U.S. and or NATO decide they're going to launch some type of a preemptive strike. Is there a solution to the convoy? It seems like they're headed to slaughter, and we're just watching it in slow motion. I should say they're headed toward carrying out a slaughter.
Well, as Brian said, I think the president, the commander-in-chief, has been very aggressive on the sanctions front. More will be done. We've been aggressive on support with our allies on making sure the munitions and weapons are that the Ukrainians have help on that front. And we've been in very, very close contact with our NATO allies to make sure that we're prepared if Russia and Putin goes further. It's very challenging and obviously very upsetting. And I think what you've seen here is one of the best coordinated alliances through NATO in recent history. And as a result of that, I think Putin is surprised by how the Ukrainians have responded and how they have handled themselves. I think they're really heroic. And B, how coordinated we've been in our response. Now, these days and the next days and weeks are going to be difficult. Everybody knows that. But the bottom line is, and I really am eager to hear from the commander-in-chief tonight about our plans for the future. We got a classified briefing yesterday on aspects of that, which I felt that we're moving in the right direction. But it's very, as you point out, Michael, it's incredibly upsetting. And to watch this go down as it is.
Brian, Zelensky has really risen to the challenge. I had no idea that he would be able to reach deep and provide this kind of leadership. What insight can you offer about him?
A man of courage, Michael, just like Vitaly Klitschko, the mayor of Kiev, who's a friend of mine. He's also taking up arms himself. Tremendous people of courage, just like all the Ukrainians, Michael. And I knew this. I lived over there. As you mentioned, I was an FBI agent over there in Kiev. And I quickly learned from these people how much passion they have and pride in you hear the phrase "glory to Ukraine." They end every sentence with that. They have so much pride in their country. They so desperately want their democracy to thrive. We have to be there for them. And, one of the things, Michael, we should address right up front, every single day, Russia makes $60 million in revenue off of the United States based on their oil sales. $60 million a day. We are literally financing this war. We cannot allow this to happen. We cannot.
Congressman Gottheimer, do you think tonight the president, as presidents are wont to do, will run through a whole laundry list of different issues, or are we living in a unique time when there really are 4 or 5, inflation being up there with this situation in Ukraine, just a handful of issues that he should drill down on?
Well, these things, I worked on 2 State of the Union addresses for President Clinton as a speechwriter to him years ago. And these things are difficult, right? Because you're laying out your agenda for the year. There's a lot that a president and an administration wants to focus on. I think the Ukrainian piece tonight, rightly, will be front and center. But I also believe there are other areas that, like, as you've pointed out, Michael, rightly, about affordability and costs, whether that's of gas or groceries or utility bills or prescription drugs that people think about every day, law enforcement and fighting crime, I think, and ensuring that we enforce laws in the books, I think will be also up there, as well as how do we come out of the COVID economy and deal with supply chain issues that continue to hinder our economy, all these COVID challenges as we come in a post-COVID world, right? And these are all things that Americans that I hear about at home talk about all the time. And then you'll hear things that the president is also focused on, I believe, like mental health issues and cancer. And Brian and I have worked on legislation together, and Brian does a phenomenal job leadership in that area, as well as opioids and standing by our veterans. There are many things that I think can bring us together. And I'm hoping tonight is about unity, because the country desperately needs it. And I think, Michael, you understand that better than anybody, how much we need to come together right now. The country needs healing, and it's been through a lot the last few years. And I really believe this is a great opportunity. And I hope the president strikes that note of coming together, of uniting. And Brian and I will obviously talk about that separately, but I'm really hoping to hear that straightforward from the president.
Hey, the two of you played a leadership role in gaining passage of the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Congressman Fitzpatrick, how are we doing on the deliverables? In other words, do you have any information you can share as to how quickly that money is going to get on the street?
So that's going to depend on the appropriations process, Michael. Well, once we pass the budget. So the bipartisan infrastructure bill that our caucus helped drive across the finish line is essentially the authorizing legislation. We now need to get to the appropriations part, which requires us to pass a budget and not a continuing resolution. So once that budget is passed, that's when the implementation will occur through Secretary Buttigieg and the Department of Transportation and various other departments as well. And then it funnels down to the states, and that's when the rubber meets the road, literally, where we can start putting shovels into the ground.
So for tonight, what can I tell folks they need to do if they want to be able to watch your response?
So I think you can connect with the No Labels group, nolabels.org. I'm sure we'll have information that they're putting out. I know they put a press alert out as well. So anybody in the media can seek that out as well by contacting No Labels on their website.
And I should say Facebook Live, I think, is going to be the platform and the vehicle where they'll go. So the president will speak. This is actually an interesting question. Are you going to wait for Governor Reynolds to conclude? I assume you're not going to wait for Congresswoman Tlaib to conclude. But how long after he speaks are you going to speak?
I think we speak right to your point, Michael. I think we speak after the Republican response.
Got it.
Is when we speak. And, I think you're going to hear, I'm hoping if people tune in, and again, it's our perspective, you'll hear a lot of common sense and unity. And again, I think that's what the country wants. I know it's what folks back home that I talk to want. And that's what you'll continue to always hear from us, because that's what we believe in. We believe in governing. This is not entertaining.
Right.
This is about governing.
Absolutely. You're here to get something done. I respect that about both of you. Congressman Josh Gottheimer, Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick, thank you so much for giving us the preview here. We really appreciate it, and good luck tonight.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Michael.
So that's the No Labels Problem Solvers Perspective Facebook Live this evening after the Republican response to the president's State of the Union address. I like the idea. And if I can stay up, I shall watch in real time. And if I can't stay up, I shall catch up with them in the morning so that we can play clips from it at night. But I'll just say this in deference to my two guests, two individuals who are not bomb throwers. They are not there to stir the pot via social media. They are there to focus on deliverables and how refreshing that is. We'll return in a moment to your conversation and comments about Ukraine. The telephone lines I'll open again right now at the usual number. Call me. I'm at